Welcome to another Live with Kevin, today on a Thursday. Glad that you're here. Some of you are watching this later and you don't care what day it was, but for those of you that are live, it's Thursday. And I'm so glad that you're here. And if you're here with us live, please go into the chat function, comment section, or whatever social platform you're on and you happen to be watching from. Say hello. Tell us where you're located. I'd love to know that. My guest would too, I know. So I hope that you'll do that. And then while you're here, if you're with us live, I want you to participate. So many things in life today are passive. This doesn't need to be one of those things. I want you to imagine that you were joining my guest and I around a table. And if you were joining us around the table, we were having a glass of water or a cup of tea or whatever your beverage of choice might be. Well, if you had a question, you would ask it. If you had a comment, you would share it. If you had an idea, you would offer it. In that setting, you would naturally do those things. So why not do those things in this setting? We are around a virtual table, so feel free to do that. And when you do that, you might ask a way better question than me. You might ask the question that you really want the answer to, and that will make this more valuable for you and likely more valuable for others that follows, including those who are on the podcast. If you didn't know, this will eventually be an episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast in, as it turns out, just about 3 months from now. And you can see that over my shoulder. So what I'm going to do now, everybody that's with us live or watching the video, is I'm going to do the countdown where the podcast itself will actually begin. Marissa, this is for you in 3, 2, 1. What people really want from work and life isn't always what we think of first. And as leaders, we can help people get more of those things than we might realize. But first, we have to know what those things are. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you grow personally and professionally to make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be with us live in the future when we do episodes just like this one on your favorite social media channel. I suppose as long as it's one of them that we broadcast on. But you can get access to when those episodes will take place and how you can get connected with those. And the easiest ways to do that are to join our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Those aren't the only places where we do these, but the easiest place for you to connect is to go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get connected with us, get information about when these are going live so you can join us in the future. My guest today, let me bring him in as I promised him I would at this juncture. His name is Zach Mercurio. He is a researcher, leadership development facilitator, and speaker specializing in purposeful leadership, mattering, and meaningful work. He is the author of The Power of Mattering, How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance. He advises leaders and organizations around the world on practices for building cultures that promote well-being, motivation, and performance. He holds a PhD in organizational learning, performance, and change from Colorado State University, where he serves as senior fellow of the Center for Meaning and Purpose and as an instructor in the organizational learning, performance, and change program. He lives in Fort Collins, not surprisingly, since he works for and teaches at Colorado State. He lives in Fort Collins, Colorado with his wife and 2 sons and their 2 adopted dogs. And so without further ado, Zach, I've been looking forward to this. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Me too. Hey, Kevin. Hey, everybody for joining. Glad you're joining.
I really have been looking forward to this. I told you in the preamble when we were not on live that a couple of past guests have mentioned you. In fact, you were quoted in a couple of the books. I don't have to quote you from this book because it's all you. And so we're going to dive into this book. But before we do that, the book is titled Mattering, and I'm not sure that I think we probably have some clue what we think that means. I'll ask you about that in a second. But how did that mattering become the focus of your work?
It really started for me in my first research study, and we embedded ourselves with a group of cleaners, janitors at the university, many of whom work overnight shifts, often are brushed by people. It's a very difficult job, not just because of the job, but because of the feelings people get in the job. It can be invisible. And so we had embedded ourselves with them for 1.5 years, and we were trying to understand what made this work meaningful. And
okay, stop. What do you mean by embedded? Does that mean you became a cleaner?
I didn't become a cleaner, but we sat with them at their break rooms. We did repeated interviews of all of them. We sort of followed them around just to get the ebbs and flows of their day, what it looked like. And then we asked all of them, when they most experience meaningfulness in their job, what is happening? And what was interesting is that almost everybody, in that group of custodians said that it was small, very small interactions where someone looked them in the eye, remembered their name, remembered something interesting about their lives, and commented on that. One custodian told me that it was when she had a supervisor who brought her into a break room, opened a dictionary, and had her read the word custodian as a person responsible for everyone in it. That moment, responsible for a building and everyone in it, that moment changed her entire belief systems about herself and kept her in a job for 30 years. And subsequent to that study, we were studying meaningful work, but we didn't have a name for what those moments actually were doing. It wasn't belonging. It wasn't feeling connected to a group. It wasn't inclusion. It wasn't feeling like you can take an active role in that group. It was something more. And that's where I discovered Gordon Flett's work. He's a psychologist on the concept of mattering, which has been in the literature for 40 years. And mattering is the feeling of being significant to the people around you. And mattering happens in moments. And we realized, this was it. A meaningfulness at work was an outcome of moments of mattering. And then obviously that sparked me to think, how do we create moments of mattering? And that led us on our research of interviewing people and working with organizations and leaders to ask the question, when you feel that you matter to someone, what is happening? And here we are.
It led to this book. It led to this conversation.
Yeah.
And I love that. One of the things I mentioned earlier that I had your book. We had already been working to get you on the show. And because I'd seen enough of the book to tell me that before we started. And then as other people were telling me about you and about some of this work, I became more and more interested in reading it. And I really love that. It's the outcome of moments, this idea of moments. And if you're watching, you may have noticed me smiling when Zach said that. And that's in part because so many leaders in organizations, whether they're at the front line, really almost all the way up to CEO, but certainly almost all leaders feel like, well, there's all these things. Well, I can't help my folks with that because, they need a bigger paycheck, they need this, they need that, and the next thing. Mm-hmm. And it's that moment. It's that being present with them. It's remembering that thing. It's following up on their biopsy. It's 1,000 things.
Yes. And 1,000 things accumulated over time. Culture, for example, in an organization is only as good as your everyday interactions in your organization.
Well, that's actually what culture is, right? It is how we do things.
Right.
Every day,
so
absolutely.
So you can have these symbols of value of people, these symbols like money or perks or awards that symbolize value, but those things are inanimate. They can't actually value a human. Other humans value humans, and other humans value humans in interactions in which they feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. That's one of the reasons why I think we've gotten employee engagement wrong. We've come at it from a programmatic perspective and not an interactional perspective. No amount of assessing engagement, no well-being program, no DEI program can make up for the experience of feeling unseen, unheard, and undervalued in your everyday interactions.
Yeah, the other thing we got wrong, I think, with engagement stuff, and again, the intention is all good, like no misunderstanding.
Oh, absolutely.
That part. But not only has it become programmatic, it's all become about something we're doing to people.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can't make you engaged. Like you're going to have to choose that. But the kinds of moments that we've hinted at, and we're going to continue to talk about, are the kinds of things that create that, or part of what creates that.
Yeah. Like engagement is all about caring about your work, being emotionally invested. But you cannot expect someone to care if they don't first feel cared for. And I think that's what we've been doing for the last 3 decades, is we've expected people to care about their work. Why aren't they engaged? If we don't first create the conditions where they feel valued, so they have the confidence needed to add value.
I have often used my co-author and colleague Wayne Trammell have often used the phrase, like, before you got married, you got engaged, and you didn't just announce to them that we are now engaged. The other person had to say yes, and there clearly was caring there, let's
Absolutely.
presume, right? Or
Yeah.
the other person wouldn't have said yes, right? So
Hmm.
it's very true. The book is framed around
Yeah.
a framework with three parts, and I want you to dive into the three parts, of course. But first, sort of, how did you come to this? How has your research led you to these three, uh, at least on the surface, relatively simple things, right? There's a lot underneath that we won't even have time to unpack all of. But on the surface, these are not difficult. So how did you come to this place? And then we'll talk about the three a little bit.
Yeah, first we asked people. I mean, we asked people. We did interviews with people. We asked, when you most feel that you matter to a leader in your job, what are they doing? And no, this is an interesting moment to stop for everybody listening. When you most feel that you matter in work to someone else, what are they doing? But then we started asking, like, what are the skills that they used? So we also assessed people on their experiences of meaningfulness, mattering, and then assessed them on almost 90 different behaviors that their leaders did. And what we have found repeatedly is that moments of mattering, the architecture of a moment of mattering, is when people feel seen and heard. So when people truly see us and they truly hear us and hear our unique voice, that's called noticing. Noticing is very different than knowing somebody. I could know you, say you were best friends. I could know you as my best friend, but not notice that you're suffering. I can know my team members, but not notice someone has a little less energy than they used to on a project or is feeling a little left out of discussions. Um, and then that's seeing people and then hearing them.
Well, can I just ask
Yeah,
though,
please.
the converse of that though, right? Because oftentimes that's sort of a conversation with leaders, especially new leaders or frontline leaders. Well, you said someone could be my best friend and I might not notice.
Yeah.
It's also true though that you don't have to be a friend to notice. Like
Absolutely.
the converse is
No,
true. And I was confident you would agree with that, but I wanted to state that because so
absolutely.
often what you said is 100% correct. But from a leadership perspective, I didn't want people losing that say, well, I'm not trying to be friends with my people. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah,
irrelevant
well,
to this conversation.
but you can know a team member, but not notice them. And the only way to truly understand somebody is to notice them, notice the ebbs and flows and details of their work, and offer actions to show them that you're paying attention. The second thing we found is that people felt that they mattered when their leaders affirmed them, not appreciated them, not recognized them, but affirmed them. Now, there's a difference. Appreciation is showing general gratitude for who someone is. It's like we can have an employee appreciation day and say, I'm glad you're here. Here's this gift. I appreciate you. Recognition is showing gratitude for what someone does. Like it's giving like an award for someone's work. But affirmation is showing someone the specific evidence of their unique significance. It's revealing what's unique about them, their unique gifts, and then showing them how those unique gifts make a unique difference. The Latin root of the word affirm is affirmare, and it means literally to firm up or make stronger. And I love that because when we affirm somebody, we're giving them the evidence of their significance, which helps strengthen the belief that they're significant.
And our belief matters so much, right? Because our
Yeah.
belief in ourselves is self affirming, and it like an upward or downward spiral.
Yeah.
And we're creating that chance for that to grow for people.
And again, a lot of us have appreciation programs, recognition programs, peer kudos platforms. But again, affirmation is delivered interpersonally. It takes a human being to reflect back to a human being what's unique about them, how they make a difference. And then the third piece is that people who felt that they mattered said they felt needed. They felt indispensable and relied on by others. Now, not too much. I'm not talking about codependence where someone makes you feel guilty in a relationship. I'm talking about feeling that you, your talents, your wisdom, your gifts, your job is not disposable, that it's needed for some bigger outcome. One of the things that our people said to us is that their leaders who made them feel like they matter say some version or express some version of these 5 words. If it wasn't for you, right? If it wasn't for you, this wouldn't be possible. Because as humans, we're biologically, psychologically, sociologically wired to be interdependent. And interdependent means we need each other. and it's baked into what it means to matter. Now, this is especially important right now, where so many people feel replaceable. So many people feel like cogs in someone else's machine, and we can't be surprised that when people feel replaceable, that they will start acting replaceable.
Right, and allow themselves to be replaced. I'm struck again by this. If it wasn't for you, and I'm thinking about, and I'm not. Well, I'm going to say something, and you can respond.
Yeah.
What I'm about to say isn't meant to be techniquey, because I know that you're not meaning it as techniquey. But what I am suggesting to you all as you're listening here, and you're thinking about your next one-on-one, or the next chance for you to give feedback, if you'd use some version of those 5 words when you're giving feedback, or you're using that sentiment when you're giving feedback, it's going to make a huge difference. Yes?
Yeah. Can I give you a quick example that happened a couple weeks ago? There was a group of educators that I was working with. There's an elementary school educators. This applies into the work context in a bit. But these educators, one teacher had like very low truancy, which is like unexplained absences. She was really good at addressing student absences, and everybody in the organization was in awe of her and wanted to learn from her. And so we just asked her
how do you get everyone to come to class?
What are you doing? I mean, right? We always have that outlier. Oh, she's just so good at that. She told me that whenever someone's absent, whenever a student is absent, she does not ask them why they were absent. She does not comment that they were absent or that they're going to have to go to the office if they were absent again. She says, the first thing I do is I tell them what I missed about them not being there. She said, when someone's absent, I'll say, hey, I noticed that you weren't in line for lunch, and your friends weren't smiling and laughing at your jokes. It wasn't as lively without you here. Or our class discussions, like, you raise your hand, you always bring up these interesting points, sometimes funny points. And we missed that. And it wasn't as good without you here. So I really hope that we can see you more. And, that's really powerful.
That is so good.
Right?
And that is so good.
So good, but it's skillful. It's not techniquey. It's skillful. Everybody here, think of someone you rely on. We all have it. It's all coming to mind. Now, think of the last time you explicitly told them. Part of what makes leaders who cultivate mattering great is that they move from having a good intention to having a good skill to turning it into action. And so often we feel feelings of gratitude for one another. We feel that our employees matter. We know that, but we tend to not take action to show them. That's what this is all about. It's learning the skills to close that gap between good intentions and good practice.
Yeah, we call that mindset, skill set, habit set. And you and I are talking exactly the same language.
Like, I don't think anybody wakes up and is like, I want to be an uncaring leader today. I actually resent a lot of the blame that's placed on leaders for what's happening, because I don't think that's helpful either. What I think happens is that when you don't know how to do something, or you don't know how to turn it into a practice or a habit, when you haven't been practicing that or never developed that, it's a failure of the broader system as well as the individual. And so, but the good news, right, is that we can learn these things and we can practice them.
We can learn these things by listening to this conversation. We can learn these things by reading your new book. We're talking with Zach Mercurio, the author of The Power of Mattering: How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance. How leaders, you, Mr. or Ms. Leader, can do this. And then, though, it's that last part that you just said. We have to translate that into new habit. And one of the things you talk about, another place on which we agree, is the challenge with the word busy. Because, well, I'll just let you lean into that. Let's talk about the challenge of busy, because now we're talking about translating what everyone who's listening is nodding about. Yep. Into the real world.
Yeah.
Right? When you're not listening to a podcast, you're not walking down the street, you're not in your car, you're leading.
Yeah. So let's talk about what gets in the way. I mean, everybody listening nod their head. Everybody I talk to is like, yeah, showing people how they matter is a good idea. Yet 30% of people feel invisible at work, right? Just 40% of people say someone cares for them as a person at work. Gallup released their latest employee engagement report that found that we're more disengaged than ever, despite 20 years in a $1 billion industry to try to solve disengagement. and well-being
Yeah, it's
programs and all of
basically, it's
that.
largely been flat.
Yeah, it's been flat,
It's
right?
basically been flat. We haven't
Right.
moved it.
Right. But if you look at that data point in that survey, that 40% of people say they
Yeah.
strongly agree someone cares for them as a person at work. 30% of that sample said that someone invested in and could even name their unique potential. I mean, this is very clear that this is an everyday interactional mattering deficit. It is not a disengagement crisis. And so, one of the things that is getting in the way is that our technology has enabled efficiency, but it's also fracked our attention, right? So, there are more things we can do. I just was in a training with a guy who kept stepping out and stepping back in. He was the leader of this organization that I was working on cultivating mattering. Kept stepping in and stepping out with his phone to answer emails, which
Class dismissed. We're not going to get
right,
anywhere.
yeah, we're not going to get anywhere. But we have more fracking our attention. Again, I don't think it's his fault, but it is his problem. And
Exactly.
what's happening is there's a psychologist, her name is Gloria Mark, and she's found that, about 10 years ago, we could spend about 2.5 minutes on any one thing without getting distracted. Now it's about 47 seconds. And leaders' attention are being pulled in all sorts of different places. So that's one barrier. But we can relearn to pay attention. One of the practices in the noticing practice that leaders who tend to do this well is they tend to actually note the details down of the people that they're working with, work and lives. If you're working on a manufacturing floor and you're a leader, and one of your employees, one of your 30 employees, says that they were having trouble with a piece of equipment, and then you said you'd get it fixed, write that down. Write down so-and-so is struggling with this equipment and put it on your calendar to check in with them next week. There's so much magic in being remembered. If a leader in that setting comes up and says, I remembered last week you were struggling with that equipment. Did we get that fixed for you? That is the power of being seen, right? But it takes practice. So we have to relearn how to pay attention. But the second thing is that we have to recognize that we're losing the skills to do this. And we've been losing them for 25 years. Kevin, so we are more connected than ever, yet we're lonelier than ever. We send about 30 to 40 text-based messages to colleagues a day. There's 38 million people using Slack every single day now, up from 12 million 3 years ago. We are on more platforms than ever. But what this has allowed us to do is evade the social situations in which we learn the skills to do all of what I'm talking about. So if you send me some good news, I can just send you a thumbs up emoji and say, hey, great job. I don't have to sit with you, name the gifts I see in you, just tell you how proud I am of you. That's a skill. If you give me some bad news, I can just say, hey, sorry to hear that sad-faced emoji. I'll talk to you next week. I don't have to sit with you and show compassion. The same is true on virtual calls and remote work. Like after this session, there's always at the bottom of these remote platforms, there's a leave section. Like you can leave. So if you're frustrated in this meeting, when that meeting time's up, bye. I can leave and not talk to you till next week. That's not normal human behavior, right? To not have to interact and seek understanding. So the less we're using these skills, the less proficient we've gotten at them. And so if people can understand that our attention is getting in the way, our sense of hurrying around is getting in the way, and that we're losing these skills, I think that awareness is a baseline to move forward. That these are not soft. It's just not the simple, like extra things you do. These are skills we need to relearn as humans and as leaders.
So other than we really ought to wanna, how do we give us a couple of tangible ideas about, pick one of the parts of the framework. What are some tangible things?
I'm actually going to go beyond the framework. I'm going to go beyond the framework. I'm going to go beyond the framework and give you the best question I think you can ask people. And this has come out of work with leaders. In fact, with a group of leaders who was working on a very complex transformation project. And we had the leaders go and ask this question, and it was absolutely transformative. I mean, it just transformed my life and how I interact with my own relationships. But the question is, when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? When you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? And write those things down and take note and truly listen to what your people have to say. And those are the things that you should be spending most of your time doing. That's the first thing I would do is ask everybody that question. That'll give you more data than any engagement assessment, any organizational climate assessment. When you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? I was in an interview with a writer who was interviewing me for a story, and I brought this up. And she went on and she asked her 13-year-old daughter that question after we had this conversation. And it was pretty emotional because her 13-year-old daughter said, it's when we're just in the car going to school, listening to my favorite music, and we're not even talking, but we're just with each other. Now, she had thought that moment, that was just a transaction. It was just a chore she had to do. But that moment, she got that data that moment was actually the time when her daughter most felt that she mattered to her. And she had overlooked that for so long. So I would start there.
I love that. I want to loop back to something for all of you listening that I already hinted at, and that is that you don't have to have signing authority. You don't have to have a budget. You don't have to be anything. You don't even have to have a position to ask that question. To do really all of the things that we've talked about today don't require you to have some sort of to be given some empowerment to do something, because all the things are choices that you can make in the moment, and as you make them, and as you said, moments put on top of moments, put on top of moments.
Kevin, that is important because when you think of what makes your leaders great, when you think of a leader that's truly influenced you, you're not thinking about big actions. You're thinking about how they showed up in small interactions. You may not have positional power in your organization. You always have interactional power. You can always choose how you show up in your next interaction. And I just want to underscore what you said. You don't need your organization's approval or permission to notice, affirm, and show the next person you interact with how they're needed.
And oh, by the way, even if you asked for it, they would give it to you, right?
Absolutely.
Because like no one's going to disagree with that.
But sometimes what happens is we become who we don't want to become. We become the leader who's not doing it for us. A lot of people ask me, hey, Zach, what do I do if my leader's not doing these things for me? And I always ask, do you do it for them? Mattering is non-directional. Culture is non-directional. Have you checked in on how your leader is doing? Have you thanked your leader and shown them meaningful gratitude for the work that they did or what they enabled you to do? Have you reminded your leader how they're needed and how they enable your projects? So we also can't expect people to do things for us that we're not bringing to the relationship as well.
100%. And another word that we talk about a lot, engagement, of course, is one of those words. Another word we talk about a lot these days is trust. And everybody that Zach's talking about, that we're talking about, is going to help build trust. Because I always say, Zach, that trust is a noun and a verb. And the more of the verb we do, the more of the noun we get. And that's fundamentally what you just said. Like if that person's not doing it for you, what are you waiting? What are you waiting on? Go first.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Great leaders tend to go first. And what you're talking about is trust is critical. I mean, going back to that noticing practice, noticing people is all about understanding them. I mean, you can't care for something you don't understand, whether it's a houseplant, a pet, a car, or a person. Seriously, if you don't understand it, you can't care for it. Like if it's a houseplant, I'm looking at one now. You need to know what kind of light it needs, how much water it needs. The same is true with people. It's easy to
overwatering it. Am I underwatering it?
It's easy to care about people from a distance. It's easy to put on your website, your people are your greatest asset. It takes getting up close to care for people. And so there's a big difference in caring about somebody and caring for people. To underscore your trust comment, I got to speak with the top 200 leaders in the U.S. Army a couple of years ago. And there was one guy who came up after, and he was one of the people responsible for the interpersonal relationship section of a curriculum for special forces officers. Some of the most elite, high pressure units, work units probably in the world. And he says, this gave me language for something. He said, because a lot of people think a lot of people think the key ingredient of a lethal unit, right, behind enemy lines is toughness. But he said, it's not, it's love. He said, no one is going to sacrifice for me if I don't know their kids' names. No one is going to go above and beyond for me if I haven't gone above and beyond for them. No one is going to support their peers if I haven't demonstrated support for them. I mean, that's the key ingredient. And what he's talking about is that the underlying predictor of trust. In fact, researchers find that without care, trust is nearly impossible. It doesn't matter how competent you are at your job. It doesn't matter how consistent you are at your job. If you don't feel like the person that you're working for has your best interests at heart, it's almost impossible to feel like you trust them. And so,
because that's the highest form of trust, right? Transactional trust, they know their job, they're not lying, is one thing, but that we're talking about something else. We're talking about selflessness, right?
yeah.
We're talking about the focus is on the. I love.
Yeah. Think about the last person you trusted who didn't demonstrate care for you. Or think about the last person you trusted in which you didn't feel psychologically safe with, didn't feel like your voice mattered, didn't feel like you could speak up, right? It's virtually impossible.
There's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about, but I don't want to. I think where we've gone is exactly where I wanted us to go. I'm just going to tell all of you that you need to read this book, and Zach will tell you how you can get it before we're finished. But I've got a couple other things I want to do, Zach, before we go. First of all, one other thing first. Is there anything I didn't ask you wished I would have?
I think we talked about it, but I do want to just underscore the difference between mattering, belonging, or inclusion. We touched on it a little bit, but because there's so many buzzwords out there in organizational life, I think it's really important to underscore the difference. Belonging is feeling welcomed and connected to a group. A lot of organizations do belonging initiatives where they make sure people feel welcome, connected, affinity groups, all of that. That's all great. Inclusion is being invited and able to take an active role in a group. But mattering is feeling significant to individual members of that group. So there's really no shortcut. If you want your people in your organization to feel that they matter, everybody in the organization needs to have the skills to see, hear, value, and show them how they're needed in their everyday interactions. And it's very hard for people to experience longstanding belonging or inclusion without feeling that they matter every day. And I think that's what's been missing in a lot of the initiatives over the last 10 years is that people have been told that they belong, people have been included, but they don't feel that they matter and are seen, heard, valued, and needed in their everyday interactions. And so I think it's really important to underscore the difference there. And I want to just underscore again the importance of trust, especially in the age of AI. A lot of people ask me about that. It's AI can do your tasks. It cannot take responsibility for your tasks. AI can do tasks, but it cannot adopt the moral responsibility we have to one another. And so that's why I believe in this age of AI, these skills that we're talking about that build trust, true human trust, it's the human advantage. Because I don't think AI will ever be able to take moral responsibility over our tasks. It can do them, but only we are responsible to one another.
I would agree with that. So I'm going to shift gears now before we finish with a couple of other questions, totally different from where we were. And the first one is, Zach, what do you do for fun?
I am on my bike a lot. So I have road bike, gravel bike, mountain bike. I love biking. That's a big thing in Colorado. And then I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old who love the outdoors. And so we go camping a lot in the summer, especially. We're always outside and just playing with them. That's the most fun I have.
Awesome. And the only thing you knew I was going to ask you for sure is what are you reading these days?
So I tend to read 2 books. I always read a novel and always read a nonfiction book together. So I'm reading Ways of Being, The Search for Planetary Intelligence by this guy named James Bridle, who they're doing incredible work on seeking general intelligence from other things, like how do we develop artificial intelligence using the intelligence of animals, plants, our non-human world. So it's just really interesting. And he talks about how just this idea that we are all being with one another on this planet. So it's really cool. And then my novel is I'm reading the 4th installment of it's called the Southern Reach trilogy. And it's incredible. It's based on you may have heard of the movie Annihilation, but it's called Absolution, and it's based on a great series by Jeff Vandermeer.
We will have links to both of those as well as
Great.
Zach's book in the show notes. I just want to make a comment to those of you who Maybe you've listened a long time, or maybe this is the first time you've been with us. And if you're just joining us, come back. But one of the things, because I have asked this question now over 500 times of people, Zach, you might find it interesting that it's, I'll bet it's 25% of people that say they're reading. Well, it's more than 25% of people that are reading more than two things at once. I get more than one book lots of times, but it's often the case that I get people who are consciously reading both fiction and nonfiction. So, and you fall into that category.
Yes.
I've never made that.
I don't know if I'm consciously doing that. I just think I need the foil of one to the other. Like it.
Well, you just said I'm always reading one.
I always do have two books. So it is a habit.
Now you know that it's actually.
It's a habit. It's a habit.
It's become subconscious, right?
It's a habit.
Maybe it was conscious.
I bet if I didn't have a nonfiction or didn't have a fiction book, I would feel like I needed to get one.
There you go. So before we go, tell us more about if people want to reach out to you. Where can they find you? Anything else that you want to say to folks about connecting with you?
Yeah, you can go to powerofmattering.com. But I would recommend actually you go to zachmercurio.com/mattering, and there you can download all sorts of free stuff. So
zachmercurio.com/mattering.
Mattering, yes.
That's not what I have here, but that's what.
That's all right. You can download a free self-assessment. You don't even need to give me your email address or anything. Templates, how to give better thank yous to people, ways to say that if it wasn't for you. There's cards you can download. I just want people to go out and start doing this, like closing that gap between intention and practice.
I love that. So everybody, before we go, and before I say goodbye to Zach and say goodbye to you, I need to ask you the question I ask you every single week. Now what? What are you going to do with this? What action will you take as a result of this? Zach and I have said this throughout this conversation, like, this is good stuff. It makes sense. Everyone's nodding their head. It doesn't matter unless you go take action. It doesn't matter unless you start working on noticing, working on affirming. It doesn't matter unless you work on taking the action. If you're frustrated because you say, well, why isn't my boss doing this stuff? The question is, what are you going to do to start doing this stuff with your boss? Like, I don't know what it is that you took from this. That's for you. But it can't end with what you mentally thought about or mentally highlighted, as Zach said it. And it can't be what you just wrote down if you're not riding your bike right now. It's got to be what action will you take when we leave. And if you do that, then I can promise you that this will be far more valuable than it would be otherwise. Zach, thank you so much for being here. My wait was worth it.
Good. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate this.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. If you like this, make sure you come back. Tell somebody else so they come. Wherever you happen to be watching or listening, you know the drill. You can give us a rating if that's possible where you are. You can make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any other episodes of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And we'll be back again next week. We'll see you then.